Hello everyone, this is a Mobula 7 HD conversion frame from MicroHeli, the MH-M7HD006 to be precise. I still have the 1102 9000 kV motors. I ended up running these Lumineer props. The flight controller ESC board is the Crazy Bee F4 version 2 with a receiver. Caddx Turtle version 2. VTX in there is the power switchable Happy Model VTX. And I used this inexpensive Uxie antenna? Uxie? I don't know what it's called. And I flew it on this MyLipo 3S 333 milliamp battery. It weighs almost 56 grams. And with the battery I flew it on, it weighs a little over 83 grams. Bottom plate looks to be 2 millimeters. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting about 105 millimeters. If you've watched many of my videos, you know that I've been kind of looking at the ultralight HD sort of thing. And I've been working on that primarily in the background, but this is the first one I'm going to bring you, and probably a series of them really. And this isn't too bad, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm running these Lumineer props. I did find that if you ran the typical 65mm props, if you hit the throttle very hard from very much of a standstill, that I got a prop strike on the camera and I ended up killing one of the cameras. So I had to go back to the drawing board, grab a new camera off another machine, and then I decided I'm not trying those props anymore because it shouldn't be striking like that. Put it together, retuned it, and tuning was a little bit of a challenge. And when we get back to the desk, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. It has to do with the weight distribution and where it's at. And I chose the battery based upon there's pretty short flight time. And so I wanted to use as large a battery as possible, because even on a 300 3S battery, the flight time was around 1 minute and 5 seconds, 1 minute and 20 maybe, if I kind of changed my flight style a little bit. And we are limited by the Mobula 7 canopy, and I used the larger or standard size Caddx Turtle. So if you notice that ring around the edge, it's the standard size rather than the skinny one that typically comes on a lot of these machines that have the Caddx Turtle inside of them. That canopy is also going to limit the ability to put an ND filter on there if you wanted to get really steady footage. And when I look at this footage now as I'm watching it with you, I see a bit of jello, a bit of shimmer, and I think that's probably due to the fact that we have 3D printed parts in here. And I've found 3D printed parts to be a little bit problematic on these ultralights in general. You kind of have to hard mount everything in order to get them to really be stable, and then you have to have pretty good tune, otherwise you'll get a little bit of shudder or shimmer in your video. Even with non-HD versions, I found that I had to hard mount the canopy, that if they're soft mounted it just wouldn't work. And there you go, 1:40 and our flight is already over. So I do want to draw your attention, if you're not familiar with the Caddx Turtle, the RunCam Splits, pretty much anything that's currently out, there are a couple of new ones like the RunCam Split 3 and the RunCam Split Nano, I think it's called. The FPV on those older edition ones, or the ones that have been out previously up to just recent, look like that you see in the bottom left-hand corner. It's not a great, it's kind of a gray and soft sort of FPV image. It is flyable, but it's just not what we expect anymore. I think if you want to do HD, you kind of have to suffer through that. I'm not overly optimistic that we'll see that improve with the next iterations, but I could be wrong. We'll see. I've got a couple coming, and we'll see what they look like in the FPV view, but that's what you get right now. And as I talked about with the 3D printed pieces, it's just, there's just sort of some movement in there. It doesn't have to be much, and there's not much you can do. And also when I talked about the PID tune, that has to do with our weight. It's so separated off the prop line, and that's why I used a heavier battery, because I felt that helped me with the PID tuning a little bit. We've just got so much weight above the prop line with the Caddx board, camera, our VTX, our antenna, also my little zip tie that secures that down. So PID tuning became a little bit of a challenge, and I felt with more weight at the bottom, it helped to even that out a little bit. I think what we need to do in this particular case, because the prop strike, and I passed that along to MicroHeli to let them know that I suffered from a prop strike, it does not look like the carbon fiber is bent. It does look like the mounting is a bit off. I did suffer a prop strike on this side. But anyways, I dropped down to these Lumineer props, and I thought the Lumineer props handled the quad pretty well. But depending upon what kind of motors you might want to choose, that might not work out. So keep that in mind. But I think to do this sort of machine, we need to bring everything closer to the prop line. We've got a fair bit of distance here, and we could have brought that down. You can see the connector and everything is up above the carbon fiber bottom plate. That could have come down 2 to 3 millimeters pretty easily and still stayed out of harm's way. We could have brought it down even further. You see we have cutouts for everything down here. We could have actually brought our motor wires down here and then plugged them into connectors that were exposed down in this area, and also the distance between the flight controller all-in-one board and the Caddx Turtle board. That's quite a bit. We could have shrunk that down as well, and that would help with performance. Also decreases the amount of TPU we're using and decreases our weight a little bit. They use the same sort of mounting system, although you will know I used a much more substantial screw up here because I found the smaller screws that came with the kit didn't hold it as securely as I wanted to, so I found a larger screw in my kit in order to firm that up a little bit. I did grind out this canopy a little bit because, as I mentioned in the flight footage, this is the standard size lens. It's a little bit thicker around the outer edge. There's some thinner versions out there that typically come with quads. Didn't do a great job on that. You can see how I don't quite get all the camera tilt that I could. Also, I thought the antenna mounting worked out pretty well. All I had to do was just use one zip tie down here, and I kind of looped off the UFL connector down here, zip tied that in, give myself just a little bit of slack, and mounts the antenna nice up out of the way. So I kind of enjoyed that part. As far as the mounting hole options, you see we have a couple of different options there. We can use the 4x4, we can use the 3x3 that Happy Model uses, and I think we can also use the one from AMAX. I think, if I'm correct, two off of here and one down there. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But we've got little tiny screws holding these things in. And I think over time, with all this TPU and screws, that the more crashes you have, the more loose it's going to get, and your footage is probably going to get a bit worse too. So I would be careful or cautious about using a lot of TPU and screws. I would prefer we screw down to the carbon somehow, so we can use a nut. We can really pressure our TPU down. That's what I've been doing on other quads on the side, is making sure our mounting system for the camera, if it's got TPU involved, that I try to mount as much down to the carbon fiber and use a screw with a nut on it. That way I can increase that pressure and firm up that mounting, because when you get any wobbles in flight, it comes out in the HD footage. Some of you might be interested in knowing about the maximum amp draw with these props on these motors, and I'll put that in a screenshot just over there. Hopefully it's big enough to where you can see it. I didn't do any big punch outs with this particular thing, but just because the flight was so short, you could, if you wanted to, if you were so inclined to, get rid of the battery tray and use, well, you can't really use a rubber band, so you could use a strap through here, right through these gaps. You could take a thin strap and run it through there. You could also toilet tank this by going sideways, because they have that kind of square cut in the middle. And that would probably be a better option to using a larger battery and possibly getting more flight time. But I did find that these props are pretty efficient. Of course, we have some new props out from HQ, but there are 3-inch props. They're not going to work on this. And you can see that the props, even these little 2-inchers, they pretty much go right up to the edge and underneath the canopy a little bit. So bringing air down through the prop, it's not completely efficient, but in this particular case, I thought the luminaires did pretty well. I still think when a company makes a conversion kit like this, that the STL files for the prints need to be available after purchase with like either a QR code download, or you get a login to the website where you can download it. I understand that they might be cautious about giving away their TPU prints, but really what good would it do unless you have this frame? So you've already got to buy the frame from them, so why not give us the ability to, at very least, print extra TPUs? Because I do think over time and crashes that this stuff will loosen up on these screws, these mounting points, and you'll get more and more jello inside. I did also find a canopy that wasn't beat up because I didn't want these holes reamed out. This canopy itself is at fault for getting reamed out in this area. There needs to be a little bit more material around here. Even though I haven't broken the canopy in this area, I've seen pictures where others have. That's not necessarily about the frame, but just additional build detail that you should know about. It was a fun little first try, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.